Hi, I'm Lydia Silva, and I wanted to share with you today a bit about keeping chickens and ducks on the Permaculture Homestead site. I want to talk about each of the types of birds and the considerations for managing them as part of a whole site design. We started off with chickens about 7 years ago when we first began our journey into permaculture design. And we put our birds into the landscape primarily to clear and clean the land up and fertilize the new areas where we would be putting our garden spots. So the things to keep in mind for keeping chickens in the early stages of the site, we had some issues with the birds flying out and escaping into the landscape and getting into quite a bit of mischief. And so they were flying over the fences and getting into newly mulched areas. They were eating up seedlings and they were able to escape pretty easily. So that is a consideration for chickens more so than for ducks. If you do decide to keep chickens in the early stages of your site development, there are a few things to keep in mind here. The breed is pretty important in the breed selection process. If you have heavier breeds that are more docile, they will be less likely to fly out of your fences and escape into your other garden areas where you don't want them. The breeds that we are currently keeping are the Australorp, the Barred Rock, and the Buff Orpington. And these ones seem to stay put and seem to be less prone to fly out than the other birds. If you do want to have fencing that will contain the birds, you need to have at least a 5-foot fence around your area. And this is a little bit at odds with some of the best management practices that we're using here at our site because we like to move paddocks around and rotate the birds to different areas of the site. And so I have yet to find a 5-foot fence that can be moved around the site. Right now we're using an electronet fence that's a poultry netting, and it's great. I love it. It's very good for protection from predators. It's very easy to move around. And the only issue that I have is that it's 4 feet tall. So it is not necessarily tall enough to contain chickens that are flying. Also, you may notice that if your chickens are bored, they are more likely to escape. So if they have an area where there isn't a lot going on and it's just a plain run, then they're going to see that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence and they will be more prone to try to escape from that area. We have used wing clipping in the past. We have clipped our wings for our chickens, and I find that they can still sometimes figure it out even after their wings are clipped, and they still can sometimes manage to escape even with one wing clipped. And it's something that you do need to keep up with because the feathers will grow back. So we've had some limited success with that as well. And I feel that as our site becomes more established, we have had better luck with chickens as they can be rotated through the different areas of the landscape at different times of year. Right now we're in winter and our chickens are in our vegetable production area. So they are doing all of the fertilizing and the tilling and the pest control that we can get them in there to do during this time of year. In the springtime, they will move into our berry area where we have our blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. And this will be early spring before those plants have fruited. In the summertime, we move them into our food forest area where we have a lot of Asian pears and European pears, and they'll stay in there for a few weeks. And then finally, we will put them into our areas that need to be cleared. So any areas that we're creating new gardens, we'll need to put them into those areas as the next stage. Great, so here we are in our chicken coop / shed, and I just wanted to show you a little bit about the housing that we have found that works the best for us, because I have tried at least 5 or 6 different housing types for the chickens and the ducks, and this is by far the best solution that I found so far. We got this shed, it's half greenhouse, half shed. We found this used and we were able to bring it to our site for a really reasonable price. And the 2 things that I like about this is that it is much warmer in the winter because we do get the natural light coming in. There's a lot more warmth in here. So when there's a snowstorm and the birds are inside, they're really comfortable. On the colder days, they're really, really comfortable in here during the daytime. Also, chickens and ducks are light dependent creatures when it comes to laying. And so they, in order to have good production for eggs, they need at least 12 hours for chickens and I believe more daylight for ducks to begin laying. And so this will give us an extra couple hours in the morning and an extra couple hours in the evening that they're getting that extra light input into their system to be able to lay better throughout the winter season. So that was really important for us to be able to figure that out over time. And it took us a few years to end up with this coop, but we're really happy with it. We also use the deep bedding system. So we mix the bedding in, we use pine shavings, and the chickens really do a good job mixing it with their feet, but we need to come in and mix it and add new shavings on top. So we only need to clean about 2 or 3 times a year. We'll clean out the entire coop and just put in new bedding. We also have these roll away nest boxes behind me, and these have been great. They are tilted inside, they're tilted on an angle. And so the eggs will roll into a little compartment in the front, and that keeps the eggs very clean. And it also prevents any hens from pecking the eggs, which has happened to us in the past. So it prevents a lot of issues with egg collection. So I'd also recommend the roll away nest boxes for the coop. So let's move on to talk a little bit about the ducks in the landscape. I decided to get ducks after I had chased a few too many escaped chickens, and I was looking for another bird that would be easier to keep contained. And I'd read that ducks were much more of a flock-oriented creature, and that's absolutely true. They tend to stay together, they tend to stay inside the fences, and they tend to be much gentler on the landscape. So I feel that if you're concerned about keeping your poultry contained, ducks are a great choice for that. They don't even need that tall of a fence. I think a 3-foot fence would even be very effective for keeping ducks. They do make a lot more noise. Their volume is much higher than chickens. You can hear a little bit of the noises they're making behind me. And I didn't know this until I kept ducks, but the female duck is the only one that quacks. The male duck makes a different sound. He makes kind of a hissing sound. And that is one way that you can tell them apart when they are younger, is by the noise that they're making. The ducks are quite noisy, especially if you have a big flock. That's something to consider. The ducks are also a bit more interactive and more curious about humans. I find that they have a little bit more curiosity and interest in what we're doing around the yard. And they can also be herded. And this was another reason that I chose ducks, because I do move my birds throughout the landscape quite a bit. I'd say every 1 to 2 weeks, the birds are on the move. And the ducks I can just walk behind them, and I can sort of put my arms out, or I can use some sticks, and I walk behind them and I can shuffle them into their new area without any issues for the most part, after they've been trained a few times to do that. That is not the case for chickens. The only way that I could get them to a new area was to lure them into the new fence with food, and they would just run all into the new fence, which worked out as well. But the herding has definitely come in handy. The ducks have a bit of a reputation for being messy, and this is certainly the case if they're kept in one area for a long time. They're going to make everything quite muddy and messy, but that's never been an issue for us, because the way that we manage them is to move all of our birds through the landscape consistently. So we never have muddy areas, and we'll just move their water. If we seem to be getting an area that's getting a little bit too muddy, we'll just move their water to a different area, and then the entire shift of fence will take them to an entirely different spot, and that's never been an issue for us. They do need a little bit more of a water change out than chickens, so because their water gets very messy and muddy, we like to change their water 2 to 3 times a day, sometimes even more in the summertime, because they are billing around for insects, and they're rinsing out their bill, and the mud is all going into the water. So they're almost like a filter feeder. They're getting in there and digging like a shovel with their bill and getting all of the little insects and bites that they can get, and then they'll come and rinse their face. Maybe you can even see that. They'll come and rinse their bill in the water to get all that dirt out of there. So they're consistently getting the water. Just a few more tips for duck. In my experience, ducks take a bit longer to begin laying eggs than chickens. So chickens will start laying at around 6 months old, and ducks can be upwards of 7, even 8 months before they'll start laying sometimes. So a bit more of a wait there. They're also quite good at hiding their eggs. The ducks are. They figured out a way that they could stick straw into the rollaway nest boxes so that the eggs would not, in fact, roll away. And I've seen them also dig into piles of straw and really put their eggs way down into the straw, so they're sometimes harder to find. Chickens will typically just lay in the nest boxes and not have any issues. If you're raising chicks or ducklings, there are many differences in breeding these two types of birds, so you'll really want to do your research on that. The chicks are much more delicate and they spend more time in the brooder. The ducks have a faster growth rate. They tend to be hardier and they can be put outside a little bit sooner. Brooding ducks requires a lot more cleaning as well. So all in all, both of the birds are great for a permaculture site. I hope this helps you decide which type of poultry might be right for your site. Thank you.